So, dear learners, so far we have discussed the meaning, definition, nature, and significance of human rights. Today, we are going to discuss classification of human rights. When we talk of classification of human rights, there are many ways of classifying human rights. For example, first of all, you will find positive and negative rights. What are positive rights? What are negative rights? That we will try to understand. Then another way of classifying human rights is civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights. And the third one is generational classification of rights. The first generation human rights, second generation human rights, third generation human rights. Now, the fourth generation human rights are also evolving. So, first of all, we are going to take up positive and negative rights. So, the positive rights emphasize access to food, housing, health, and education. They are basically the rights that should be available to all of us, and they are positive socio-economic conditions of life. After positive rights, we have, the example of positive rights, for example, access to food, housing, health, and education, etc. Then you have negative rights. The negative rights refer to the freedom from certain things like slavery, torture, discrimination, violence, and suppression, etc. Now, we are going to take up civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. Before that, we should remember that the in the United Nations, we have United Nations has developed what is called International Bill of Rights. And in the International Bill of Rights, we have UDHR that was adopted on 10 December 1948. And that is why every year on 10 December we celebrate International Human Rights Day. So, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights has all these rights, that is civil rights, political rights, economic rights, social rights, and cultural rights. After this, this is only a declaration, so that is why it is not having implementation mechanism. So that is why two legally binding covenants were adopted by the United Nations in 1966, and they are International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights with their optional protocols. You see, so you see the covenant, the nomenclature itself is showing that the civil and political rights, they are recognized at the international level by the United Nations, and it is legally binding treaty. So that is why we have civil and political rights. That is the Covenant on International Civil and Political Rights. After that, you will find the same year United Nations adopted another important covenant, and that is uh, International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So the economic, social, and cultural rights, they are also universally recognized. When we talk of civil rights, they refer to the fundamental rights and freedom that protect individuals from government actions, ensuring equal treatment and participation in civil and political life. So these, civil rights in this sense are very, very important. These rights are crucial for fostering a just and democratic society. For example, the right to life, liberty and security, freedom of expression, right to privacy, right to family, etc. These rights are considered as civil rights. After civil rights, we have political rights. These political rights encompass the rights related to participation in government and political processes. These rights empower individual to engage in political activities, vote in elections, and have a say in the decision making process of their nation. So, these rights, you can understand, are mostly granted by the democracies. In the dictatorial and authoritarian, totalitarian regimes, these rights are often violated. So these political rights, they are giving opportunity as well as right to the individuals in the political space. They can participate, they can contest elections. So now, for example, in our own country, everybody who has attained a particular age, he can be a voter. For example, every adult person in our country who have attained the age of 18 years will be a voter in the country without any discrimination. Again, everybody who has attained a particular age, for example, 25 years, can contest elections for the parliament, for the Lok Sabha. So it means, these rights, they are important. Um, so right to vote, again, right to protest, that is also important. In democracies, you will find that if you are not agreeing with the policies of the government, or you feel that your rights are being violated, you feel that the government's policies are infringing upon your freedom, your rights, your liberty, then the people have every right to protest against the government. And these protests should not be crushed. People should not be, these protests should not be suppressed. Of course, there is a corresponding duty on the protesters, that they cannot take law in their hands. They cannot destroy public property. They cannot harm others. So the constitutional, democratic, peaceful protest is also allowed. So the right to protest is also recognized under political rights. Right to contest elections. Anybody can contest election, whether he's a rich or poor, if he's fulfilling certain qualifications. Again, people have the right to criticize the government's policies. So the criticism against the government cannot be branded as anti-national. So in democracy, these rights are important, these political rights. After political rights, we have economic rights, and these economic rights pertain to the entitlement that enable individuals to participate in and benefit from the economic life of society. These rights include the right to work, fair wages, and the opportunity to enjoy in an adequate standard of living. For example, right to work, right to own property, right to adopt profession of one's choice, right to equal wages for equal work, etc. What we have seen, why these rights are important: equal pay for equal wages for equal work. Women mostly were discriminated against. There was no equal wages for equal work. So that is why the contemporary discourse on human rights emphasizes on equal wages for equal work. At the same time, for example, in our country, there was something like bonded labor, begar. That is a punishable crime in the country. Bonded labor cannot be encouraged. It means that if the people are working, they should be paid, and their work should be recognized. So that is why these economic rights in this sense are important. There are many countries who give unemployment bonus to the people, those who are unemployed. So that is why when a particular government is criticized uh, for not doing much for ensuring employment, it means that the people are talking about economic rights. Then we have social rights. Social rights involve the right to social security, health care, and education, aiming to ensure that individuals can lead a dignified and fulfilling life within the community. These rights address social inequalities and promote the overall welfare of the population. For example, right to consenting marriages, health, education, and participation in social life. In India, we can include rights against untouchability, discrimination, and humiliation based on caste. It may also include access to public places and places of religious worship, etc. We should know that in our country there was there were segments of people or sections of people who are denied access to places of religious worship. Untouchability was practiced in the country. So that is why, in this sense, you can understand the significance of these social rights. So that is why social rights promote social justice. They provide a space to all the individuals to develop their personality to the fullest extent. And that is why they also save us from what is called social terrorism. Then we have cultural rights. Cultural rights protect the right of individuals and communities to preserve, develop, and express their cultural identity, including language, religion, and traditions. These rights recognize the diversity of cultures within a society. For example, right to profess, propagate, and practice the religions of one choice, that is, freedom of conscience. Right to conserve and protect one's language, script, and culture. Right to establish and administer the denominations, etc. In our country, for example, when we talk of cultural rights in the Constitution of India, under Article 29 and 30, we have cultural and educational rights. And under this, you will find that in democracy, there is always the identity of the minorities, especially that is most of the time, is the subject of discussion. And minority has a natural, minorities have a natural fear all over the world that they will be assimilated into majority, or the majority will try to impose its language, its culture, its religion, its idea upon the minority. So that's why in democracies these days we will find multiculturalism is being emphasized. It is said that the diversities are to be celebrated, they are to be respected, they are to be, they should not be treated as a threat to the national integration or the national security. So that's why our Constitution of India, one of the finest constitutions in the world, that guarantees the the rights to religious and linguistic minorities to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. At the same time, under Article 29 and 30 of the Constitution of India, the minorities have been, linguistic and religious minorities have been given the right to conserve their language, culture, and script. It means you'll find that the cultural rights, they are very, very important, and they are recognized universally. After this classification of rights, we have another important way of classifying human rights, and it is called generational classification of human rights. So the rights that evolved during the great liberal revolutions, for example, English Revolution of the 17th century and the French and American Revolution of the 18th century, they are called first generation rights. The first generation rights, you will find what was emphasized in the English Revolution of the 17th century, for example, in the Glorious Revolution of England 1688, or you'll find French Revolution 1789, or we can talk of American War of Independence and then the Bill of Rights. They emphasize civil and political rights. At that time, we should remember that the people were demanding rights against monarchies, papacy, and feudal lords. And that is why they were emphasizing civil and political rights or negative rights. So, when they were emphasizing civil and political rights or negative rights, so these rights, in the very beginning, right from Magna Carta to the American War of Independence, if we see, and others, French Revolution or the English Revolution, civil and political rights were demanded. So that is why they are called first generation human rights. The main focus of these rights is liberty and freedom. Why liberty and freedom? Because most of the people at that time, uh, you know, they were during medieval period, they were sandwiched between three important institutions, that was papacy or the church, and then monarchy, a state headed by monarchy, and the feudal lords. So that is why at that time freedom was something that the people demanded, and they tried to give a normative justification to freedom and liberty. So the underlying theme of you see the first generation of human rights is basically liberty and freedom. After the first generation of human rights, we come to discuss the second generation of human rights. The rights that evolved and were emphasized during the great socialist revolutions, like Bolshevik Revolution of Russia 1917, Chinese Revolution of 1949, these rights they were demanded especially in the 20th century, and they include economic, social, and cultural rights, or what we call positive rights, and they are called second generation rights. They are positive rights. If we try to understand theoretically or normative justification of the claim, then you will find all the Marxist revolutions or the socialist revolutions in the world, they were emphasizing on equality. The division of society between haves and have nots, the class division, that was something that they identified. And they were saying that the what is happening, that inequality is there is suffering of the working class, and that is why equality should be achieved. There should be social control over means of production, there should be state control over means of production. What should happen, that economy should be regulated in such a way that it is creating equality rather than inequality. So that is why they denounced capitalism. They denounced the system that was responsible for inequality according to them. And that is why what happened, that second generation of human rights were emphasized. So the second generation of human rights are basically economic, social, and cultural rights. Here we should remember, when we are talking about second generation of human rights and the first generation of human rights, that you will find that the first generation of human rights, they were demanded mostly by the liberal nations of the world. And that is why ICCPR, that is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that satisfied the aspiration of the liberal nations of the world, capitalist world especially. So that is why during the Cold War, when there was ideological antagonism and the ideological division, that was very much reflected in the international arena and at all the international fora, at that time you'll find that this International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was adopted, and simultaneously you'll find, to satisfy the aspirations of the socialist countries, socialist world, uh, you'll find second generation of human rights was included in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So here again, we should remember this generational classification of human rights. Then we have the third generation of human rights. The rights that emerged after the Second World War, focusing on group rights, are called third generation rights. The demand for these rights got impetus due to the liquidation of colonies in the post World War II period and national liberation struggles in the global south. So you'll find global south was basically championing the cause of third generation of human rights. These rights are also called solidarity rights or collective rights, as they focus on groups rather than individuals. You'll find in the uh, civil and political rights, individuals are there, the rights, civil rights for the individuals, political rights for the individuals. Again, you have economic, social, and cultural rights. Again, the individuals are important. What happens here, that the groups are becoming important. So these rights include the right to self-determination. Many people were reeling under colonialism, and that is why they wanted that the right to self-determination should be respected. The right to development. Global South was, you know, not very advanced. Its economic condition was very bad, and Global South was basically victim of centuries of colonial exploitation. That is why it was rendered weak and poor. And this was the reason that the Global South was demanding an international order that should be based on equality and justice, especially economic order. And that's why they emphasized on right to development. At that time, it is said that almost 80% of the world population that was living in global south was having control, or that was having only 20% of the global income and wealth, whereas the 20% of the world population at that time living in the global north was enjoying with 80% of the income and wealth, global wealth and income. So this was the reason under these kind of circumstances, you will find that right to development becomes important. Then minority rights, for example, rights of indigenous people, their rights were also violated by the colonialists especially. So the rights of indigenous people, the right to development and environmental rights, they all are group rights, they are enjoyed in collectivity. So that is why these rights are called third generation human rights. After that, we are coming to discuss the fourth generation of human rights. What happens that this fourth generation of human rights is still just like an infant baby, but you'll find a lot of discussion and deliberation churning is going um, on the issue of enjoyment of fourth generation of human rights. What we should understand that with the advancement of technology, the demand for a new set of rights is evolving. This demand mainly revolves around the use and misuse of technology and people's right to access the technology. It may include the right to access the internet, the right against cyber trolls and bullying, and the right against surveillance, violating the right to privacy, right related to euthanasia, mercy killing come under this, for example. You see, it is being increasingly felt by the people, and all are concerned that we are living in what is called the surveillance society. Surveillance society, where the surveillance by the state and the government is there. Whatever you are producing, for example, through WhatsApp, through your mail, that is being monitored, watched somewhere. So under this kind of circumstances, many sensitive information of the individuals or other entities may go to other people. So that is why the danger of cyber terrorism, cyber crime, all this is increasing day by day. So when the technology is making our life easier, it is also posing threat to our privacy, our life, our many things. So under this kind of circumstances, you see the debate is on the use and misuse of technology, where people should be having. For example, you'll find in our own country there was, for a when there was disturbances in Jammu and Kashmir, when there were disturbances in Manipur, you'll find the government wanted to impose ban or restriction on the use of internet. And this happens not only in our country, it happens in most of the countries of the world when the law and order situation is there, because um, people or the miscreants can also use, the criminals can also use this technology to create disturbances. They can evoke sentiments of the people to commit violence. So ultimately that misuse of technology, that threat is there. So that is why a state everywhere that does this, a state tries to impose restriction for a particular period of time. So for example, the restriction on internet is there for 1 month in a particular area which is disturbed and where there is potential danger of misuse of internet. So under this kind of circumstances, when the state is imposing ban, then people say this is violation of our right to livelihood, because these days you will find that right to livelihood is also dependent upon internet. There are many economic activities, they are regulated, they are controlled through internet. So that is why when the right to access internet is denied, that becomes the violation of human rights. On the other hand, the state's argument is that it is in the larger interest of the public, because there are miscreants, there are criminals, there are people who can misuse this particular technology or internet, and they can create a situation which may go out of hand. So ultimately, this kind of debate and churning is there. It is not only this, but we also find the advancement in the field of biotechnology has created a lot of problem as well as advantages. It is leading to what is called genetic engineering, and its potential use and misuse are being discussed and deliberated upon under the fourth generation of human rights. For example, you know, a person who is suffering from pain, he should be given euthanasia or he should be killed through injection or not? That is a question, of course, a normative question, and that's why you'll find on both sides of the people, the both on both sides of the fence, people are there. There are people who support euthanasia or mercy killing. There are people who oppose it. At the same time, you'll find that in the field of biotechnology, what is happening, that the genetic engineering is there. Food is being genetically modified, and these genetically modified food, genetically modified seeds, they are creating, of course, if they are able to what we call increase production, but at the same time they are posing serious threat to health issues. So that is why the genetic engineering can be used by the terrorists, by the antisocial elements, by others. That is also one of the problems. At the same time, you know genetic engineering, when it is going to be applied on human beings, that involves a lot of threats, challenges, and that is why these issues are being discussed under fourth generation of human rights. But as I said earlier, that this right is still in the stage of infancy. But keep in mind that these rights, that is the fourth generation of human rights, are going to be discussed all over the world, and the literature on human rights, and the movement for human rights, and the human rights experts, scholars, policymakers, they have to address the issue of fourth generation of human rights. Thank you very much, dear learners. With this, we come to conclude the first part of our discussion, that is uh, what we understanding human rights, that is what is human rights, the meaning of human rights, definitions of human rights, significance of human rights, the nature of human rights, and after that, the classification of human rights. With this, we are going to wind up our first part, that is the first topic, and after that, we will take up the next topic, that is evolution of human rights from Magna Carta to International Bill of Rights, in the lectures that follows after this. Thank you very much.